Okay, 3.2 angles and parallel lines. I didn't have an objective here, but we're going to learn the theorems of angles created by the transversal of parallel lines. So just go through some of these. We're going to show you some of the theorems, and we'll prove them later. So to start off with, postulate 3.1, this is what we start with, is that if a transversal intersects two parallel lines, here's our two parallel lines, then corresponding angles are going to be congruent. And so we can see that 2 here is corresponding to 6, so 2 is congruent to 6. So you should be able to tell through some of these which ones they would be congruent to as well. So go ahead, pause the video, find the corresponding angles so you can see which angles must be congruent. Okay, so this is what you should have found if you knew which angles were corresponding, right? 7 is corresponding to 3, 4 is corresponding to 8, and 5 is corresponding to 1. They're all in the same corner, so therefore they're corresponding. So from this, we're able to prove a lot of other theorems, and we could do these proofs later, but for now you can just kind of believe me. So theorem 3.1, the alternate interior angles theorem, that says if a transversal intersects two parallel lines, and notice every single time, it's only with parallel lines, okay? It's only if they're parallel. Then the alternate interior angles are congruent. So that means that 3 would be congruent to 6. So go ahead and put which one must be congruent to 5 then. Hopefully you saw that angle 4 must be congruent to 5 because they are alternate interior angles. Alright, then down here we have theorem 3.2, same side interior angles theorem. This one says if a transversal intersects two parallel lines, again you see it's only with parallel lines, then the same side interior angles are, and I'm going to need room for this, so I'm going to do a little arrow, supplementary. So same side interior supplementary. The way I remember that is same side interior, the only ones that start with S. I know that we also call them consecutive, but for this sake, same side interior starts with S and supplementary starts with S. So if we look over here, we would see that angle 3 and angle 5 are both same side interior. Therefore, that we could say that angle 3 plus angle 5 equals 180. On the other side, we could see that angle 6 and angle 4, so angle 6 plus angle 4 must equal 180. So let's just do a little bit here. So we know that corresponding angles are congruent, right? So we know that angle 1 and angle 5 are the same. And we also know that vertical angles are congruent, so we could say that 1 and 4 are the same. And so we know these are the same, and these are the same, and we also know that 4 and 8 are the same. So we're going to get these 4 angles are all going to be exactly the same. And then we know that, again, corresponding are congruent. So 2 and 6 are going to be congruent. 2 and 3 are going to be congruent because they're vertical. 3 and 7 are going to be congruent because they're corresponding. And so you have these 4 now that are congruent as well. And according to the same side interior, any red angle, so we could draw it like this, like any of the red ones, plus any of the blue ones, now we know are going to add up to 180. We can mix any combination of a red and a blue here, and it would add up to 180. So we could do like angle 1 and angle 6, they'd add up to 180 as well. Even though we just have same side interiors adding up to 180, we can use that to prove that any two that aren't the same here are going to add up to 180. So 5 and 6 will add up to 180, or 5 and 2 will add up to 180, or 5 and 3, or 8 and 3, or 8 and 2. All of those are going to be supplementary. So pretty cool. All right, let's go to this one. Says given AB is parallel to CD. Good. We have parallel lines. We need that in order to use our theorems. And angle 1 is 110 degrees. Well, let's just go ahead and put that in here, 110 degrees. Find the measurements of the following angles. So the first one asks for is angle 2. Well, angles 1 and 2 are right next to each other on a straight line. Therefore, I know they have to be supplementary. So this is going to be 70 degrees. Okay, then it says find angle 5. Well, look, angle 1 and angle 5 are corresponding. So angle 5 must also be 110 degrees, right? Because they're going to be congruent. And then lastly, angle 8 is also going to be congruent to angle 5 because they're vertical. So we could say that angle 8 is also 110 degrees. Pretty easy stuff. once we know those theorems, these problems work out pretty nicely for us. Let's go to the next page. All right, so this one's a little bit different. Here they give us one angle, angle 6. They say it is 47 degrees. Find the measure of all the other angles. Can't use a highlighter. Well, I don't have a highlighter on my iPad, but I can use red and blue. And I'm going to just mark all the ones that I know are congruent with angle 6 in red. So I know that angle 1 is congruent. I'm not going to color it. I'm just going to mark it. Because they're vertical. I know that 3 is congruent to 1 because they're corresponding. I know that 8 is congruent to 3 because it is vertical. And that only works because they tell us right here with these arrows that these two lines are parallel, and then they're telling us with these arrows that these two lines are parallel. So I can actually use this as a transversal as well. Well, look, that means that 16 corresponds to 8, 11 is vertical to 16, and it corresponds to 3, so those are congruent. 9 is congruent to 11 because it corresponds with 11, and it corresponds with 1, so it's congruent to both of those. And 14. So we know that all the red angles here are going to be 47 degrees. They're all the same. Well, now I could go in with a different color highlighter or my blue marker, and I could say, well, that means that this blue angle has to be its supplement, right? Because they're on a straight line. So 47 plus what equals 180? Well, we could do that pretty easily, right? We're just really all we're asking is 47 plus x equals 180. Subtract 47 from both sides, you get 180 minus 47. Well, what is 180 minus 47? Well, it's 133. So the other angle must be 133. So the blue one is 133. I'm going to try and do a double line. Well, then these ones must be 133 because they're vertical. And 7 is corresponding to angle 5, so it must be 133. And 4 is vertical to 7, so it must be 133. And 12 is corresponding to 4, so it must be 133. And 15 is vertical to 12, so it must be 133. And 13 is corresponding to 15, so it must be 133. And finally, 10 is vertical to 13, so it must be 133. So there we have found the measure of all the angles. They're all, now we know all the blue ones. Let's draw that a little bit better. How about that? All the blue ones with the double marks, these are all 133 degrees. Pretty easy to do. All right, this next one, this is the type of problem you'll see on a test, and it's tricky. This is how I recommend that you do this guy. Right now, you got all these numbers in weird spots, and it's going to be really hard to solve it. But what you can do is just kind of add in another line here that goes right through that little point. Okay, and let's just, we know the top and the bottom are parallel, but let's just say that that line's parallel as well. Well, if that's true, we can fill out a bunch of information here. For example, don't I have a transversal of two parallel lines here, making these two angles corresponding? So that means that this angle right here is 125 degrees. Well, I know that anytime I go all the way around in a complete circle, it should add up to 360. So if I was to kind of maybe just call this angle x degrees for now, I would be able to say that 125 plus 119 plus x equals 360. And so we could do a little bit of math, 125 and 119. Let's see, what is that? 244 plus x equals 360. Subtract the 244 from both sides, you get 360 minus 244. What is that? 116. So we know that x has to be 116. Okay, here's why I wanted to know that. If I go in here, and now I know that x equals 116, look at how I drew these. This line is also parallel to this line, and now I have a new transversal. Wouldn't this angle here correspond to this angle here? Of course it would. So this is 116 degrees. Well, now look how easy it's going to be to find angle 1. Angle 1 is just the supplement to 116. So a little bit more algebra, not too much, just a little bit. We know that angle 1 plus this 116 degrees has to equal 180. So we will subtract 116 from both sides. Should have a little degree mark there. And I get that angle 1 equals 180 minus 116 is 64. And so there's my answer. Takes a little bit of work, but adding in this middle line really makes all the difference, because then you could find this angle, and then you could find this angle, and then if you have this angle, you have this angle, so you can find this one. There's more than one ways to do this, so maybe some of you guys could see if you could figure out the other way, and then you could do whichever one you like. And lastly, the summary. If you were given the value of one angle formed by a transversal of 2 parallel lines, could you find the rest of all the angles? If so, how? Describe your process. You should be able to say, yes, you can do this because we did it up here. So describe that for me in words. Thank you.